Ah, the pre-sequel. Released in 2014 and firmly sandwiched between the series' second and third game, this curious little entry in the franchise was the metaphorical middle child trying to stand out in a family full of overachievers. Developed by 2K Australia and Gearbox Software, the game takes players to Pandora's moon, Elpis, and gave us floating bandits, low gravity, and more Australian accents than I thought possible in a single game. At first glance, the pre-sequel might seem like a filler episode in the Borderlands saga. The marketing wasn't as flashy, the setting felt a bit niche, and let's be honest, who really asked for a prequel centered on Handsome Jack? And yet, what it lacked in bombast, it made up with unique charm, gameplay tweaks, and an overabundance of Aussie humor. It wasn't just trying to stand out in the shadow of its sibling, it wanted to carve out its own identity. For fans of the series, the pre-sequel is a love letter to the franchise's chaotic, loot-filled world, but with a twist. It dares to experiment with new mechanics like low gravity and oxygen management, while diving deeper into the lore of one of gaming's most iconic villains. For newcomers, it's a great way to learn how to survive in a wasteland, where every creator either hides a rare weapon or a psychopathic bandit with a death wish. So, grab your oxygen kit and join me as I double jump my way through this retrospective. It's time to revisit a game that may not have shot for the stars, but still managed to land on the moon, quite literally. The development marked a significant departure for the franchise, as for the first time in the series' history, the core development wasn't handled by Gearbox Software. Instead, the project was entrusted to 2K Australia. This decision brought fresh talent and a distinctive Aussie flair to the series, infusing it with new humor, cultural nods, and an irreverent energy that differentiated it from its predecessors. Set on Pandora's moon, Elpis, the choice of setting was both a creative risk and an opportunity to experiment with new mechanics. The moon allowed for low-gravity gameplay and the introduction of oxygen management systems, two features that became central to the game's identity. These mechanics not only changed up the gameplay, but also tied into the narrative, creating a cohesive world-building experience. The decision to include low gravity led to numerous gameplay innovations, including floaty jumps, extended traversal opportunities, and of course, the infamous butt slam. 2K also used the project to explore Handsome Jack's backstory, delving into the character's transformation from an ambitious Hyperion employee to the ruthless, charismatic villain of Borderlands 2. The narrative required a delicate balance, needing to appeal to both longtime fans who had played the previous entries, but also be accessible to newcomers who'd have little to no knowledge of the universe. By framing the game's events as a prequel, the development team could simultaneously expand the lore and reimagine similar events of the Borderlands universe. But despite its innovative elements, the development wasn't without its challenges. Many fans questioned whether the game justified its status as a full-price release, with some perceiving it as an extended DLC rather than a standalone title. The game's scope and duration, while substantial, led to debates about its place in the franchise. Moreover, a handoff to 2K Australia meant managing expectations and ensuring that the series' signature tone and mechanics were faithfully preserved. Ultimately, the pre-sequel represents an ambitious experiment in the franchise, a game that embraced innovation, while navigating the challenges of living in the shadow of its predecessor. While it may not have reached the same critical heights, did it succeed in keeping the Borderlands spirit. If you've ever played a Borderlands game, you know what to expect. Cel-shaded visuals with thick comic book lines and bright, punchy colors. The pre-sequel largely sticks to this formula, but leans into the sci-fi setting with an abundance of glowing neon blues, purples, and space-themed effects. While Pandora remains dusty and brown, Elpis sticks out like a shiny thumb. One of the standout graphical features are the low-gravity environments. The moon's barren landscapes are both vast and intensely atmospheric, with skyboxes that feature distant planets, the ever-expansive nothingness of space itself, and the ever-present blue hue of Hyperion's signature space station. The juxtaposition of Elpis's desolation with the vibrant glow of Helios creates a visually striking contrast. Lighting plays another crucial role in setting the tone, with explosions being rendered in dazzling displays of color and motion that are even more spectacular in low gravity, capable of sending both people and objects into low orbit. The new weapon effects, particularly with elemental guns and laser weapons, add an extra layer of visual flair to the chaotic combat. And the new addition of cryo weapons also brings some new visual delight, as enemies are frozen solid and shattered into icy shards, adding a chillingly satisfying end to combat encounters. Environmental design adds another layer of depth. While the moon's surface may seem desolate at first, the varied locales, ranging from bustling spaceports, derelict facilities, and lava-filled caverns, keep the visuals fresh and engaging. The team also did a stellar job incorporating verticality into the level design, using the low gravity mechanics to create sprawling maps that reward exploration and creativity in navigation, although sometimes it can feel a little needlessly complicated. There were multiple times in my playthrough where I just had to look up on a guide on how to complete a certain side quest, only to show that I just had to jump into a random wall until I seemingly clipped up onto it. The character design in the pre-sequel also received a makeover, with the cel-shaded style lending itself to exaggerated expressions and unique silhouettes. This ensured that both allies and enemies are instantly recognizable, even in the heat of battle. The moon-themed gear and costumes for the Vault Hunters further immerse players in the off-world experience, blending style with the sci-fi setting. And while it is obvious that most enemies are just reskins from Borderlands 2, especially the scav type, it's greatly appreciated, as shooting the same marauders and psychos does get a little stale after a few hundred hours. While the pre-sequel doesn't reinvent the visual wheel, it polishes and adapts the existing Borderlands aesthetic to suit its lunar setting. The results are visuals that remain true to their roots, while delivering enough visual twists to keep things feeling fresh and exciting. Audio hits all the usual notes you expect from a Borderlands game: chaotic gunfire, satisfying explosions, and the screams of bandits as they get vaporized by electricity. But it also adds more elements that enhance its lunar setting and gameplay innovations. The most prominent addition are the brand new laser weapons, which bring a futuristic punch to the franchise's auditory palette. Whether it's Hyperion's precise hums or Malawan's sizzling plasma, the diversity in laser gun sounds ensures that every trigger pull feels distinct. Cryo weapons, meanwhile, deliver a frosty snap as enemies freeze and shatter, adding an auditory payoff to their visual evisceration. Each weapon manufacturer retains its signature sound identity from 2 as well. Torg's explosive chaos remains gloriously loud and over the top, while Jacob's firearms crack with a vintage Wild West charm. These sounds are crucial for immersion, allowing players to instantly recognize the gear they're wielding. Beyond weaponry, the environmental sound design amplifies the moon's characteristics. The lack of atmosphere adds a muted quality to the world, and subtle touches like echoing footsteps and the soft hiss of your oxygen tank creates an auditory landscape that feels both vast and isolating. In combat, the absence of air dampens explosions and gunfire, giving battles on the moon's surface a unique auditory texture compared to Pandora's chaotic cacophony. Jesper Kid's score is yet another highlight. Already known for his work on the Assassin's Creed and Hitman series, Kid blends atmospheric sci-fi beats with the frenetic energy of combat. Tracks are once again divided into ambient and combat categories, seamlessly shifting from tension to action with perfected smoothness. And lastly, there's Claptrap. Love him or hate him, that little robot's shatter is inescapable, as there's now quite a few of them to be found on both Elpis and Helios. For all intents and purposes, the pre-sequel plays like a bizarre world Borderlands 2 DLC. You can tell it's the same engine and the same core mechanics, but something feels off. The core gameplay of Borderlands is still there, of course. You all can talk your way across various locales while shooting most if not all living things you come into contact with. But let's start with the new features. Since you're on the moon, you need oxygen to survive. It adds a small survival mechanic and it's rarely punishing. Plus, your ass kit lets you both double jump for increased movement options and lets you butt slam for more butt slamming options. There is a little bit more to this mechanic, however. Your oxygen decreases when you're out on the moon's wastelands and decreases faster when you perform a double jump as you prepare yourself using air. So, you'll need to keep an eye out for both air geysers and remote air bubbles to restore your ass kit before it runs out. To keep the loot cycle engaging, the pre-sequel introduced moonstones as a secondary currency. These glowing green rocks could be spent at the grinder machine to create better weapons, adding an extra layer of resource management. The grinder allowed players to recycle old gear into new weapons, reducing waste and encouraging experimentation. It was a fun new addition, though some found it tedious to grind, pun intended, for materials to create top tier items. Additionally, moonstones could also be traded in at the Crazy Earl shop to get your hands on some SDUs in order to increase your inventory space. They also added Loonshine weapon effects. These added a unique twist, providing guns with special buffs such as increased damage, faster reload speeds, or bonus elemental damage. These effects gave players an extra incentive to experiment with their arsenal, making the hunt for the perfect weapon even more lucrative. While these systems expanded the customization options, they sometimes felt like gimmicks rather than transformative mechanics, especially when compared to the streamlined loot progression of Borderlands 2. The other two additions are of course the new class of laser guns and the new type of cryo weapons, both of which I touched on earlier. The classes are also great fun, being a lot more diverse and creative than the first two games were in my opinion. Each Vault Hunter brings a boatload of unique abilities and skill trees, once again greatly increasing the replayability. The first of these classes is Athena the Gladiator. She is a defensive powerhouse that excels at tanking damage and reflecting it back at her enemies. Her main action skill, the Aspis Shield, allows her to absorb incoming fire before hurling the shield like a high-tech boomerang, dealing devastating damage. Players that enjoy strategic gameplay and clever positioning to maximize their effectiveness in battle will appreciate Athena's versatility, as her skill tree allows her to focus on melee combat, elemental damage, or survivability. She's essentially a spacefaring Captain America, but with more sass and better loot. Nisha the Lawbringer is all about offense, boasting one of the highest damage outputs in the game. Her action skill, Showdown, auto-targets enemies and increases gun accuracy and fire rates. This makes her ideal for players who like to charge into the fray guns blazing. Her skill trees allow players to focus on pistols, damage amplification, or even melee combat if you prefer getting close to your enemies. Nisha's playstyle is catered to those that want to be the ultimate gunslinger, delivering punishment with pinpoint accuracy and overwhelming firepower. Wilhelm the Enforcer blends offense with capabilities. His action skill, Wolf and Saint, deploys 2 drones, Wolf for attacking enemies and Saint for providing health. This makes Wilhelm a versatile character for players who prefer a balanced approach to combat, combining firepower with defensive support. His skill trees let players enhance the drone's abilities, improve his personal durability, or lean into the cybernetic augmentations that gradually transform him into the half-machine juggernaut we eventually face off with in Borderlands 2. Wilhelm is perfect for players who enjoy adaptability and staying in the fight longer. Claptrap the Frag Trap is the wildcard of the group, designed for players who thrive on pure, unbridled chaos. His action skill, vaulthunter.exe, randomly selects one of up to 15 abilities based on the situation, often mimicking the skills of other classes or triggering bizarre effects like rubber ducky mode, which bounces bullets off him. While Claptrap can be incredibly powerful in the right hands, his unpredictable nature can also backfire, making him a high-risk, high-reward character. Fans looking for something a little more experimental will find Claptrap equally entertaining and infuriating. Additionally, after the game's launch, 2 more characters were added to the roster, the first of which being Aurelia the Baroness. She's Sir Hammerlock's sister and brings icy elegance to the battlefield. Her action skill, Cold as Ice, summons a frost diadem shard that automatically seeks out and damages enemies. Aurelia's skill trees emphasize sniping, elemental damage, and teamwork, making her a versatile choice for those who enjoy crowd control. Her aristocratic attitude and biting humor make her one of the most distinctive personalities in the game. And lastly, Timothy the Handsome Jack Doppelganger offers players a chance to step into the shoes, or at least the face, of the series' most iconic villain. His action skill, Digijax, summons digital clones of Handsome Jack to fight alongside him. Timothy's skill trees focus on survivability, boosting his clone's effectiveness, and even gaining buffs by channeling Handsome Jack's egotistical charisma. Together, these classes offer a range of combat styles and strategic options, encouraging players to experiment and find their preferred approach. Whether you want to smash enemies with Athena's shield, dual-wield revolvers as Nisha, command a small army of drones as Wilhelm, embrace the chaos with Claptrap, freeze the flesh off your enemies as Aurelia, or swarm the battlefield as Timothy, the roster provides plenty of opportunities for creative and chaotic fun. Sadly, the pre-sequel side quests leave much to be desired, unlike the creative and varied side missions of Borderlands 2, which delivered unexpected adventures, memorable characters, and even the occasional laugh. The side content here often feels like uninspired padding. Most quests boil down to collecting a thing or killing a guy, and occasionally a combination of both, offering very little in terms of engaging narratives or creative gameplay twists. Shoot this guy in the face, Bad Hair Day, Slap Happy, the one where Handsome Jack dares you to go to infinite sleep, Arms Dealing, the Clan War side quests, and lest I forget, Claptrap's Birthday Bash are all memorable quests that have stuck with me since I played them for the first time all those years ago. While there's a few standout missions, Hothead and Fresh Air made me crack up in particular when I encountered them for the first time. The majority of missions lack the humor and charm that course through Borderlands 2. The result are side quests that often feel more like busy work than meaningful content. Instead of pushing players to explore the world or uncover hidden secrets, the quests feel mundane and repetitive, leaving little incentive to fully dive into Elpis' wasteland. And despite the additions I mentioned, the pre-sequel often feels like a rough draft of its predecessor. While 2 struck an elegant balance between chaos, strategy, and reward, the pre-sequel struggles to maintain this harmony. The oxygen system, while novel, feels underutilized and borderline trivial beyond the early game. Butt slams, while satisfying, lack the strategic depth to remain consistently impactful and often require players to put themselves in harm's way, compared to the other mechanics in the series. It's as though the pre-sequel was experimenting with ideas, but never fully committed to refining them. Late game encounters are another point of contention for me. What starts as a satisfying romp slowly devolves into a slog against bullet sponge enemies. Encounters with these enemies, like boss fights against the Alpha Superior or in the Sentinel, highlight a frustrating imbalance. Instead of requiring strategy or exploiting weaknesses, these fights often boil down to unloading an entire inventory's worth of ammo, less a test of skill and more a test of patience. In comparison, Borderlands 2's boss fights felt more dynamic, with mechanics that rewarded creativity and teamwork. In the pre-sequel, the bullet sponge design sapped so much fun out of these climactic moments, leaving me more annoyed than exhilarated. I even tried mitigating it by using the infamous golden keys in order to get gear that was set to my exact level. However, anytime I redeemed the code and loaded it into the game, the keys I just redeemed had already vanished into the void. Thanks, Randy. While early to mid-game progression felt rewarding, late game difficulty spikes often felt arbitrary, especially in a solo playthrough. Without top tier loot, I often felt I'd have to go grind to even stand a chance. This completely derails the pacing and momentum of the story, making the final acts feel less like a culmination of skills and more like a tedious obstacle course. Additionally, the game crashed on me multiple times, which is the first time any Borderlands game has done so, only heightening my own frustration, of course. If there's one thing Borderlands the pre-sequel gets right, it's the story, or at least its ambition to tell a compelling origin story for Handsome Jack, one of gaming's most memorable villains. Set between the events of Borderlands and Borderlands 2, the game explores how Jack, initially an ambitious Hyperion employee, descends into the power-hungry maniac we know and love to hate. This descent is framed by an overarching story told by Athena, one of Jack's former Vault Hunters, as she recounts the events to Borderlands favorites Lilith, Brick, and Mordecai. The game starts off with Lilith interrogating Athena, with the former asking the latter why she helped Jack open the vault on Elpis. We're then treated to a run-of-the-mill intro, which highlights the 4 main Vault Hunters. After awaking on Helios, a Claptrap unit informs us that Dahl's Lost Legion has launched an attack on the space station. After getting acquainted with the game's combat mechanics, we meet up with Jack, and after dealing with his attackers, we revive him. A grave mistake. He informs us we need to push Dahl out of Helios before we can focus on the vault. He tries arming the defenses, but they're being jammed by a signal coming from Elpis. While trying to evacuate, we run into the leader of the Lost Legion, Zarpadon, as well as this thing. Fight our way through Helios before we make it to the Moonshot Cannon, where we face off against the game's first boss, Flame Knuckle. After defeating him, we climb into one of the cannon's containers and are shot down towards the moon's surface. But we're not in the clear just yet, because as soon as we awake on the moon, we start suffocating on account of the lack of atmosphere. We follow Janie Springs and she informs us that we'll need to get an Oz kit from a nearby building, and after clearing it out, Janie repairs one for us, allowing us to breathe outside of secure interiors. Janie then has us repay the favor by killing Deadlift for her, a real scumbag with an unhealthy obsession for jump pads. After cheesing him with the most overpowered early game sniper, we collect a Digistruct key, which allows us to Digistruct moon buggies at any station. After making it to Concordia, the game's main hub area, we collect some moonstones and trade them to Earl for some transmitters, climb our way up some buildings and attach the transmitters in order to discover where the jamming signal is coming from, and it's revealed to be Crisis Scar, which houses an abandoned doll facility. Once we arrive at Crisis Scar, we fight our way through the scavs before facing off with the duo of Red and Belly. After flatlining them, we shut off the jamming signal and return to Concordia to meet with Jack and confront the Merif. Jack initially lets him go, but after the Merif tries to shoot him in the back, he mercilessly executes him. We go meet with Janie, and she tells us to meet with the man known as Davis Pickle, who can help us find the military AI that Jack can use in order to make an army for Hyperion. And after Digistructing a Stingray, we travel to the Outlands Canyon. After arriving, we meet up with Pickle, who is revealed to be an actual child. He informs us that we can get an AI from the Drakensberg, a nearby ship. However, when we try crossing the bridge to the ship, its current occupants retract the bridge. But we circumvent this by dumping some methane onto the lava, freezing it and allowing us to cross. We enter the ship and kill everyone inside, including the bosun, the Drakensberg's new pseudo-captain. Upon defeating him, it's revealed that his assistant Skipper is actually the AI we're looking for. We take Skipper, now named Felicity, to the Outlands Canyon. We call a train that takes us to the Titan robot production plant. We fight through scavs and torques alike, until we come across a guy called Gladstone, a Hyperion scientist that was at the plant working on creating robots when the scavs took the place over. So we clear out the scavs, turn on the power, eliminate some prototypes, and synthesize the eye parts into a finalized Oculus. We then help Gladstone calibrate some turrets by letting them kill bandits, before then taking everything to a prototype robot and installing the eye, turrets, and Felicity. However, she's none too pleased about being repurposed into another tool for destruction, as she turns on and attempts to kill us. As the fight progresses, she becomes more and more willing to commit violence, and after defeating her, she becomes the first fully fledged constructor for the Hyperion army. Afterwards, we return to Concordia and group up with Jack, Roland, and Lilith. We beam up to Helios, fight our way through the Lost Legion, and go up to Jack's office. Once we make it inside, we travel to research and development in order to rescue Gladstone. After meeting with him, he tasks us to rescue 3 of his colleagues scattered throughout the labs. I return to Jack's office and watch as he mercilessly kills Gladstone and the other 3 scientists, thinking that there might be another mole on the moon. We parkour our way through the veins of Helios, an unfinished part of the space station, destroy the regulators on some plasma boosters, and make it into the ice control room. After attempting to shut it down remotely, it's revealed we're locked out, so we'll have to do it manually. We take out the shields protecting the eye and then travel down to disable it, but are confronted by Zarpadon, and after taking out both her and her power suit, Zarpadon warns Jack of his own death, regardless of what happens on this day. But he's already grown too arrogant and self-centered to hear her out, so executes her. We once more try to shut down the eye, but Moxie, Roland, and Lilith betray Jack, causing the eye to explode via singularity. Jack is understandably quite annoyed by this.
Friggin' cowards! They're no better than faggots!
vowing to take revenge in events that'll take place entirely off screen. Jack then tells us he knows the location of the vault, so we head back down to Elpis where I face off against a flying bullet sponge. A brisk 15 minutes later I kill it and enter Tycho's ribs, as the vault is hidden inside of old Iridian ruins, which I did think was neat, as the Iridians are, in my opinion, one of the most underutilized races of creatures in Borderlands lore. So I did like the fact that we got to explore some of their futuristic architecture. I blast my way through many ancient creatures, probably enough to put them right onto the endangered species list. Then we enter the Vault of the Sentinel, where we face off against its guardian, the Sentinel. After dealing with its regular form, we're not quite showered with loot just yet, as it transforms into the Empyrean Sentinel, which we also defeat by shooting it a whole bunch of times. We approach the floating vault symbol that's appeared, and when Jack touches it, he gets shown visions of the vault on Pandora. Jack's celebration is short-lived, as Lilith appears and punches the symbol into his face, branding his visage with the signature V. We then cut back to present day, with Athena saying she quit working for him right after this. But Lilith still opts to have Athena be executed, and as the Crimson Raiders pull their triggers, the Watcher appears and saves Athena, warning of an impending war, and that they'll need all the help they can get. The narrative structure is definitely interesting, using Athena's retelling as a way to contextualize the events on Elpis. The storytelling approach creates a sense of inevitability, as players already know Jack's ultimate fate, but are drawn to see the hows and whys unfold. Jack's transformation isn't a sudden snap, but rather a gradual shift as his ideals clash with his actions. Watching him transition from an anti-hero willing to make tough choices for the greater good, to the egotistical, ruthless tyrant of Borderlands 2 is both fascinating and unsettling. The game introduces several new, memorable characters who flesh out Jack's story. Janie Springs, the resourceful and delightfully flirtatious mechanic, brings humor and heart to the desolate moon. Pickle, the scrappy orphan with a Cockney accent, offers a mix of charm and annoyance, but mostly annoyance. Meanwhile, Zarpedon, the enigmatic antagonist leading the Lost Legion, provides a solid foil to Jack's rise to power. Zarpedon's motivation, protecting Elpis from Hyperion's exploitation and stopping Jack from finding the vault there, add layers of moral complexity, making her a surprisingly sympathetic villain. But despite its strong central narrative, the game's pacing occasionally stumbles. Some story missions feel like padding, dragging down the plot with fetch quest style objectives that often lack narrative weight. Compared to Borderlands 2's tightly woven plot, the pre-sequel sometimes struggles to maintain this momentum. However, the dialogue, brimming with wit and absurdity, keeps things entertaining, even during slower moments. The interplay between Jack and the Vault Hunters is another highlight. Jack's charm, sarcasm, and growing paranoia create tension and humor in equal measure. His manipulation of the player characters, framing them as unwitting accomplices in his schemes, underscores the game's darker themes of power and control. By the end, players are left questioning their role in Jack's transformation. Were they heroes, pawns, or something in between? While Jack's rise and fall take center stage, the story also successfully expands the broader Borderlands universe. Elpis is brought to life not just as a setting, but as a narrative focal point. The moon's struggles, its people, and its relationship to Hyperion create a rich tapestry that complements the main plot. Additionally, hints about future events in Borderlands 2 are scattered throughout, rewarding fans who pay close attention to the dialogue and echo logs. Ultimately, the pre-sequel tells a tale that, while occasionally uneven, offers a deeper understanding of one of gaming's most iconic characters. It's a story about power, ambition, and the cost of success, wrapped in the franchise's signature blend of humor and chaos. Borderlands the pre-sequel received two major expansions that aim to expand its universe and gameplay offerings, Holodeck Onslaught and Claptastic Voyage. While they brought additional content and new challenges, their impact on the overall game experience varied significantly. The Holodeck Onslaught is essentially a wave-based arena mode, offering players a combat-focused experience without much story or exploration. It challenges players to survive increasingly difficult waves of enemies, testing your skill, weapon loadouts, and cooperative strategies. While the mode delivers some high-octane action for those that love combat, it lacks the narrative depth and humor that makes Borderlands games memorable. Critics and fans alike found it underwhelming, often describing it as repetitive and lacking the creative spark found in earlier Borderlands expansions, especially after coming off the highs that Borderlands 2 delivered. For players looking for loot and combat practice, it serves its purpose, but for those expecting more storytelling or character development, it falls short. Its other main DLC, Claptastic Voyage, is however widely regarded as a standout expansion in the franchise. It dives into the bizarre and chaotic mind of Claptrap, taking players on a surreal journey filled with humor, glitches, and existential dread. The story explores Claptrap's memories and insecurities, blending clever writing with unique level design to deliver an experience that feels distinct and memorable. The expansion introduces new gameplay mechanics, including computer software-based enemies and glitch-based weaponry, adding variety to the combat. Glitch is a new weapon rarity exclusive to this DLC and can be recognized by their pink rarity and binary code flowing across the weapon's body. What's unique about these guns is that they can occasionally glitch out and randomly have a special effect that will stay active until players either reload or swap weapon. Overload consumes more ammo but deals an insane amount of damage. Loop makes the gun have a chance to not consume ammo and to restore ammo to the magazine when you kill an enemy. Multi-shot turns every weapon into a shotgun of some sort, and the Amplify adds damage at the cost of consuming the player's shield. The story cleverly ties into the larger Borderlands narrative, shedding light on Claptrap's origins while offering plenty of fan service and absurd humor. It successfully combines the series' comedic tone with thoughtful character exploration, earning it praise as one of the best parts of the pre-sequel. Together, these DLCs highlight both the strengths and weaknesses of the entire game. Holiday Onslaught emphasizes combat but lacks narrative punch, while Claptastic Void showcases what the franchise does best, blending humor, storytelling, and inventive gameplay, even if they don't fully address the base game's shortcomings. When the pre-sequel released in 2014, it arrived to a mix of excitement and skepticism. Critics and fans alike were eager to dive back in the universe, but there was also an underlying question: did this game truly justify its place as a full-priced standalone title? Reviews for the pre-sequel were largely favorable, but noticeably lukewarm compared to the rave reviews that Borderlands 2 received. The game earned praise for its fresh mechanics, particularly the low-gravity gameplay, and the addition of cryo and laser weapons, which introduced new strategies to combat. The humor, emboldened by the unmistakable Aussie charm brought by 2K Australia, was another highlight, with many applauding its irreverent tone and memorable characters, Janie Springs in particular. However, the game wasn't without its flaws. Critics pointed to its uneven pacing, a narrative that, while ambitious, occasionally faltered under the weight of its own scope. The decision to frame the story as a prequel meant players already knew the ultimate fate of key characters, which somewhat dulled the narrative tension. I mean, damn, by this point we know half of the playable characters meet their end at the hands of future playable characters. Additionally, late game boss fights were widely criticized for their bullet sponge-esque design, a stark contrast to the more dynamic encounters in Borderlands 2. Among players, reception was similarly split. Longtime fans appreciated the deeper dive into Handsome Jack's backstory and the opportunity to explore an entirely new setting. However, many felt that the pre-sequel ended up playing it too safe, failing to innovate enough beyond what its predecessor had already perfected. The comparisons to Borderlands 2 were unavoidable, and for some, the pre-sequel felt like an extended DLC rather than a true sequel, or prequel. Over time, the pre-sequel has carved out a niche within the Borderlands community. While it never reached the same iconic status as Borderlands 2, it remains a beloved entry for those that appreciated its unique setting. The game's focus on Jack's origin story added valuable depth to the overarching lore, and its gameplay mechanics, particularly the low-gravity combat and cryo weapons, have influenced discussions about what worked and what didn't in the franchise's evolution. The game's legacy is also tied to its role as a bridge between the second and third entries. For better or worse, it expanded the universe and set the stage for future entries, even if it didn't quite achieve the same level of polish or acclaim as its peers. It stands as a testament to the franchise's willingness to experiment, even if those experiments didn't always land perfectly or reach their full potential. Borderlands the pre-sequel is remembered as a respectable entry in the series. Its charm, humor, and innovative ideas ensure its place in the Borderlands pantheon, even if it will forever live in the shadow of its predecessor. It's a game that dared to experiment, yet often found itself tethered by the gravity of its predecessor's successes. It wasn't quite the evolution some fans hoped for, but it wasn't a step back either. Instead, it occupies a unique space in the Borderlands universe, an experimental detour that gave us some new mechanics, fresh laughs, and a deeper understanding of Handsome Jack's descent into villainy. For all of its flaws, pre-sequel stands as a testament to the franchise's creativity. Whether you were freezing the balls of bandits with cryoguns, butt-slamming psychos into the stratosphere, or pondering over why you chose to play through the entire game as Claptrap, the game left its mark in ways that can't be ignored. It may not have reached the same legendary status as Borderlands 2, but it remains a vital chapter in the series' ongoing story. In the end, it reminds us why we keep returning to the Borderlands universe. Chaos, humor, loot, annoying robots. It's got everything in spades. So, here's to a game that dared reaching for the moon. Even if it didn't quite stick the landing, it sure made the journey memorable. The innovative ideas, while interesting, didn't always feel fully fleshed out, leaving players longing for the refined gameplay loop of Borderlands 2. Still, for fans of the franchise, it's an enjoyable detour, even if its ambitions occasionally exceeds its execution. Hey there! Thanks for watching to the end of this video. If you enjoyed, leave a like, a comment and subscribe, as I have 291 more games to cover between now and the inevitable heat death of the universe. Follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. I've been Xeniverse, and I'm off to the Arctic Circle.